Kingaringiri was a tall, flame-haired, freckle-faced girl who was friends with a boy and his younger sister. One day the boy and his sister heard Kingaringiri playing in their older sister's room. They pleaded with their older sisters to let Kingaringiri come out to play, but their older sisters said that she couldn't. They had cooked Kingaringiri in the oven. Gee, I thought that would get a bit of a laugh. Then there was the 5-year-old boy who was married with 2 children. Where are they? Where are the children? Here they are. The mother of his children wasn't his wife, but a nurse who travelled internationally. After a while, the boy became a sole parent. He divorced his wife because she spoke too much. All right. They're my best imaginary friends, so I'm not going to get any more laughs out of you for that. So, as you may have guessed, these aren't entirely real-life scenarios. The instances of children's imaginary friends, or in the last case of the boy, imaginary worlds, which are also known as paracosms. Imaginary friends aren't always invisible. Sometimes they're called personified objects, teddy bears or dolls that children treat as real or animate. Probably the most famous personified object is Hobbes, from the cartoon strip Kelvin and Hobbes. Now, to Kelvin, Hobbes was a real-life tiger with whom he could go on adventures. But to the rest of the world, Hobbes was a stuffed toy, and a pretty mangy one at that. Imaginary friends are quite common. Up to 65% of children at one point in their development may invent one. Princess Margaret had an imaginary friend called Cousin Halifax. Frida Kahlo painted her twin imaginary friend in one of her many self-portraits. And even one of Brad Pitt's and Angelina Jolie's many children is reported to have an imaginary friend, so you know they must be fashionable. So beyond giving us something to chuckle about, what possible value could having an imaginary friend have in childhood? Well, as it turns out, there are many benefits associated with having an imaginary friend, some of which extend to adulthood. What I'm going to argue today is that these benefits are symptomatic or are derived from one of childhood's most pleasurable but beneficial activities, play. So, what kind of benefits are associated with having an imaginary friend? Well, first of all, children with imaginary friends have been shown to pass theory of mind tasks before children who don't have them. Now, a theory of mind is the understanding that another person's behaviour is driven by their internal mental states, by their thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and desires. Psychologists typically test to see if a child has a theory of mind using what we call the false belief task. Now, in the false belief task, a child who's typically around 3 to 5 years of age might be introduced to a character. Let's call her Sally. So Sally loves playing with her doll. But after a while, she gets a little bit bored of playing with her doll, so she puts the doll away into the doll's house. Then Sally's friends come to play, and they go outside. But lo and behold, behind the curtain is Sally's devious younger brother, who's going to play a trick on Sally. He takes the doll out of the doll's house and puts it into the cupboard. Then Sally's friends and Sally return back to her room, and they want to play with her doll. And at this point, the child's asked the question, where will Sally look for the doll? Now, if the child has a theory of mind, what they will say is that Sally will look in the doll's house for the doll. This indicates the child has an understanding that Sally has a representation of reality, a false representation of reality in this instance, and will act upon that false representation of reality by looking in the wrong place. Children who fail the task often say that Sally will look in the cupboard, that her mental representation of reality matches reality. So having a theory of mind is being able to take another person's perspective. And research in my own lab shows that, or has found that this early developing perspective-taking ability derived from having an imaginary friend comes in handy during conversational interaction. We conducted a study where a child sat opposite an experimenter and they were separated by a barrier. In front of both the child and the experimenter was an array of pictures, just like these scary clowns here. Now, the child's task in this particular experiment was to describe one of these pictures, in this case, the clown in the red box or red border, to the experimenter using only spoken language. Now, there's a problem here, and the problem is that this one target picture differs from the other pictures on only a few dimensions. Firstly, the type of hat that the clown has. Secondly, the colour of the clown's collar. What the child has to do in order to be good at this task is to take the perspective of the experimenter, understand what unique information the experimenter needs to know about that particular picture, and provide it to them using spoken language. And what we found is that children with imaginary friends were better able to do this than children without them. But the benefits of having an imaginary friend don't stop there. Children with imaginary friends have been shown to be more creative than children without them. And some of my own research suggests that this creativity extends to adulthood. Children with imaginary friends have been shown to produce more complex spoken narratives than children without them, which is to say they're better storytellers. Not surprisingly, creative writers have a higher than normal incidence of childhood imaginary friends. So having an imaginary friend is associated with an early understanding of other people's minds, high creativity, and good language skills. These are all high-level, complex cognitive skills that many would say are unique to humans. But why does having an imaginary friend result in these benefits? The answer, or at least a big part of the answer, seems to be play. By their very definition, children who engage with imaginary friends, or who invent them, engage in large amounts of what we call pretend or fantasy play. Now, pretend play is, let's get those clowns off the screen. Pretend play is creative. It's creative play and involves sequencing events, just like you would do if you're telling a story. So good creativity and good narrative language or storytelling skills seem to fall directly out of playing lots. But what about theory of mind or perspective taking? What children are doing when they're playing is they're behaving in a manner that contravenes reality. They're taking the real and the possibly mundane and they're twisting it to yield new perspectives on objects and people and events. They're inventing new characters and they're role-playing, so they're impersonating or pretending to be other people. And it's this ability to switch perspectives on the world and inhabit someone else's skin that seems to result in an early understanding of other people's minds. So, given these benefits, one question that parents often ask me is, how do I get my child an imaginary friend? Well, that's not really the point, and I don't think you're going to be able to buy one anytime soon, not even on the internet. But fear not, there seems to be a more sensible way to satisfy that consumer urge. 2 lines of research suggest that these benefits might be available to all of us. There's some fascinating work being conducted at Yale University which shows that actors have advanced theory of mind skills. So acting is an advanced form of pretending. An actor has to get inside the skin of a character but has to fool the audience to believe that the performance is itself believable. This group's also shown that participating in acting classes improves theory of mind skills in teenagers. So you don't have to invent an imaginary friend to get some of the benefits associated with having one. The other line of research comes from my own research that myself and my colleagues are conducting on children who attend schools that have a play-based curriculum. Now, there are many variations of play-based curricula, but for our purposes, it's sufficient to know that children who attend play-based schools, as I'll call them, learn through the medium of play. This is a mixture of self-directed and teacher-scaffolded play. The idea is that if play is beneficial, then learning through the medium of play should not only be fun, but should also result in developments or beneficial developments in the kinds of domains that I've been talking about. So what we've done is we've conducted 2 studies where we've compared children who attend schools or play-based schools and compared them to children attending mainstream schools with a more traditional didactic curriculum, like many of us would have had when we were going to school. In one study, we've compared these two groups on their creativity, and we found that the children attending the play-based school have higher creativity. So this is consistent with the research on imaginary friends, where we see this association between play and creativity. In a second study, we've followed two similar groups, so a group attending a play-based school and a group attending mainstream schools, and we've followed these children over the first 6 months of their first year of school. So their kindergarten year or their prep year or their reception year, depending on where you're from. And we've tracked their growth in their play skills, but also their narrative language skills, so their storytelling abilities. And here's a sneak peek at some of the results that we've found. Is that coming up? Okay, so this graph here shows the growth over the first 6 months of school in the two groups in their narrative language, so their storytelling ability, and their play abilities. As you can see from the blue bars, we see rapid and significant gains in both play skills and narrative language abilities in the children attending the play-based school. Children attending the traditional schools show some growth, but it's not nearly as rapid as the children attending the play-based school. So what these data suggest is that learning through the medium of play not only improves your play, but improves your spoken language or your narrative language abilities as well. So I've come here today with the message that activities involving play, such as inventing an imaginary friend, or learning through the medium of play at a play-based school, lead to some significant and important developments in some higher order, complex cognitive abilities. The take-home message that I want to tell you is that play matters, but it's important to point out that not everyone thinks this way. We've seen an increasing trend in Western English-speaking countries for the early introduction of formal academic instruction in early years education in subjects like mathematics or numeracy and literacy. In countries like Australia, the United Kingdom and the USA, we've seen the introduction of standardised tests or examinations to quantify these efforts. Now, this has led to some frightening trends. The most frightening one that I've heard is that many elementary schools in the United States have cancelled recess so they can fit in more formal academic instruction. Outside of the educational context, we see many products now being marketed to parents. These are educational products which aim to introduce concepts like reading to children as young as 18 months. Now, these products appeal to parents who want to give their kids the best start in life. It's understandable that you'd want to do that. But the problem is, a lot of these products have no empirical bases. And time spent memorising flashcards means less time engaging in pleasurable and beneficial activities like play. The net outcome is that we've come to devalue play, which is a mistake. Here are some quotes from some leading organisations and scholars that underline this point. This is from the Alliance for Childhood, a US-based organisation. We have seen increased academic pressure in children's lives through inappropriate standards and have managed to undermine their primary tool for dealing with stress, freely chosen, child-directed, intrinsically motivated play. And this is from the American Academy of Pediatrics in their flagship journal, Pediatrics. The American Academy of Pediatrics links increases in depression and anxiety to a lack of unstructured playtime. It recommends that children spend at least 60 minutes each day in open-ended play. And finally, in a wide-ranging review of the scientific literature, Hirsch-Pasek and colleagues have stated both free play and playful learning should command a central role in high-quality education. To conclude, I want to leave you with a question, or pose a question, and this is a question that every generation should ask themselves. What kind of adults do we want today's children to become? Do we want children who are well tutored in test taking, but who are susceptible to stress and disorder? Or do we want creative, socially competent children who are well equipped to tackle the problems of tomorrow? If we want the latter, then I suggest we start taking play a little bit more seriously. Thank you.